Hey guys, it's reading day, and today's book is Bram Stoker's Dracula. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey everybody, welcome. Happy Sunday. How's everybody doing? Great. Let me get TikTok started here, and away we go. Push that button. Okay, hang on. Trying to get my buttons pushed. Give people time to come in. All right. Again, hey everybody, how is everybody doing today? Happy Sunday. Well, not really happy. We all have the majority of us have to go back to work, so it kind of makes it unhappy Sunday. Anyway, my name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. Still got my bruise under my eye. Starting to fade more. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you think you have a paranormal need, we can get to you. It may take us a while, but we definitely can get to you. In the case that we can't get to you right away, we do have psychics on staff who could phone you and talk to you about what may or may not be going on. And most of the time, if it is paranormal, they can calm the energy down. Then we can get out there. It usually doesn't take us more than 1 or 2 days to get out on location. Okay, that being said, a lot of you are watching on Facebook. And if you would do me a favor, for those of you that are watching on Facebook tonight, please hit that follow button. I'd really appreciate it. And share this. Please share this. Also, during the show, talk amongst yourselves in the chat room. And show us some love. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up for those happy heart things I can never do. But give me a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. Same thing with YouTube. If you're watching from YouTube, I have over 1,000 videos sitting over there, all of this show. All different formats, because I'm a photojournalist in real life, and so I like to change it up. So you're going to see different things. But they are in categories, so you can just check out. If hearing a psychic talk is your thing, Nancy Matz has her own category in there. I have a category on cryptids. I have a category on ghosts. You name it, it's over there. I have a category on current news. Like I said, you name it, it's over there. Okay? And again, do share, and hit that like button for me if you like what you see in here. Twitch, same thing. Most of social media works the same way, except over here. Hello, TikTok. Except for TikTok. So, TikTok, if you like what you hear tonight, I am trying to get 1,000 likes tonight on the show. Okay? 1,000 likes. And it's great to see you all at TikTok coming into the room. Also, I do have a goal of 100 llamas. If you could help me out with that, that would be great. It's not required. Hang on a second. It's not required for you to do that, but I would really appreciate it. Just like over here at this other side, with TikTok and Facebook and everybody, I am running the address of the California Haunts Patreon. That's how you can support and keep our show on the air. We broadcast Sunday through Friday every week at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And it's a good way to help keep us on the air, right? Just join our $5 level, $5.50 level, which is 18.7 cents a day. Get all kinds of goodies with it. All kinds of goodies. Okay, that being said, welcome everybody. Today is Sunday, and this is the day that I normally read from a paranormal themed book. It might be a fantasy book. It might be true paranormal tales. But normally I read for about an hour, maybe longer, depending on how long the chapters are. And we're right in the middle of Bram Stoker's Dracula. So we're going to continue with that. So just to let you guys know, TikTok, you don't get to hear my intro, but everybody else that's out there in radio land gets to hear it, podcast land. And except that grab your popcorn and snacks and sit back and enjoy the show, because grab, what is it, a little dash of pixie dust, okay? Because we're here to entertain, and that's That's what we love. That's what we love to do. Okay, so I am going to be reading from Bram Stoker's Dracula. I will try to get through 2 chapters. The air conditioning is off. It's not quite as hot as it was on Thursday when I made this attempt. So hopefully I can get through 2 chapters. If not, then I'll just do 1 chapter. But we'll see what I can do. Okay, so let me have a little drink, a swig of water here, and away we go. And like I said, just sit back and enjoy. And I know it's hard. Like on TikTok, you younger people want instant gratification. You don't like to wait. But you know what? Sometimes reading a good book and just sitting back and waiting does all the difference in the world. And be sure to share this TikTok. Hit that share button. Okay. Okay. Since I don't read Roman numerals, we are at chapter XXII in the book. And a quick synopsis. I did read Thursday. I got sick Thursday because I had been overheated. Didn't realize how overheated I was when I came in here. I'm still a little overheated today. I took a geyser nap around 3 p.m. Pacific, which I thought was going to be like an hour. And to my horror, I missed the show. The show was supposed to be at 6 p.m. Pacific. It was 6:05 when I woke up. It's a good thing I woke up, right? So that's why we're back at our usual time on a Sunday. Because usually on Sundays I broadcast at 6 p.m. Pacific, and we're at 6:35 Pacific, which is about our normal time for really getting things going. So just bear with me, and there's no air conditioning in the other room, so I am a little overheated, but not as much as I was on Thursday. Thursday I was really overheated to the point that I wasn't breathing good or anything. So hopefully today is not going to be like that. I can get through to the book. Again, I'm going to be reading from Bram Stoker's Dracula, and when we get done with this book, I'm going to be reading from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So we're just going to keep moving. These books are copyright free. They're in the public domain. If you want to read some really cool books, Project Gutenberg. Project Gutenberg. Just type that in on your laptop or your phone. Project Gutenberg has all these thousands and thousands of books, and anything up to 1940, around the early 1940s, mid 1940s, no copyright. So here we are. So don't turn me in, the Facebook police or internet police or anything like that. I see you all in there. See you coming up. Unfortunately, I cannot read that. The writing's teeny tiny. You're on an iPhone 11. So, okay. Anyway, so double tap that screen if you like what you see. I'm trying to go for 1,000 likes today. So double tap that screen. Double tap that screen. All right, here we go. And I'm excited. So here we go. Reese in the chat room. Okay, chapter XXII. Again, I do not do Roman numerals. Never did, never have. Jonathan Harker's journal. When we left our heroes, they were just having meetings about how they were going to deal with Dracula. And they had already had a confrontation with him. Miss Mina, who's Jonathan Harker's wife, right, had been bitten. So Dracula's trying to entice her to become one of his brides. Okay, that's where we're at. To where Dracula seems to think she's at his beck and call by now. If you remember, Mina's best friend Lucy did get taken in by Dracula, and they had to take care of her by putting a stake through her heart and cutting her head off because she was kidnapping children and stuff. Well, they're trying to do the same thing with Mina. So hopefully they don't get that far. All right. All right. Jonathan Harker's journal, chapter XXII. 3 October. It is now 6:37. Okay, here we go. 3 October. So make sure I get the right angles. Okay. As I must do something or go mad, I write this diary. It is now 6 o'clock, and we are to meet in the study in half an hour and take something to eat. For Dr. Van Helsing and Dr. Seward are agreed that if we do not eat, we cannot work our best. Our best will be, God knows, required today. I must keep writing at every chance, for I dare not stop to think. All, big and little, must go down. Perhaps at the end the little things may teach us most. The teaching, big or little, could not have landed Mina or me anywhere worse than we are today. However, we must trust and hope. Poor Mina told me just now, with the tears running down her dear cheeks, that it is in trouble and trial that our faith is tested, that we must keep on trusting, and that God will aid us up to the end. Please remember, these books were written in the mid 1800s. Okay, so the stuff isn't going to be up to today's normal standards. So don't turn me into the Facebook police or any internet police for this or TikTok police. I'll do my best, when it comes to different subjects on here to tap around it for people. Okay? Sometimes I don't, though. All right. The end. Oh my God, what end? To work. To work. When Dr. Van Helsing and Dr. Seward had come back from seeing poor Renfield, we went gravely into what was to be done. First, Dr. Seward told us that when he and Dr. Van Helsing had gone down to the room below, they had found Renfield lying on the floor, all in a heap. His face was all bruised and crushed in, and the bones of the neck were broken. Make sure we have audio over here. I'm just double checking all my settings. Okay. Dr. Seward asked the attendant, who was on duty in the passage, if he had heard anything. He said that he had been sitting down. He confessed to half dozing, when he heard loud voices in the room, and then Renfield had called out loudly several times, "God! God! God!" After that, there was a sound of falling, and when he entered the room, he found him lying on the floor face down, just as the doctors had seen him. Van Helsing asked if he had heard voices or a voice, and he said he could not say. That at first it had seemed to him as if there were two, but as there was no one in the room, it could have been only one. He could swear to it, if required, that the word God was spoken by the patient. Dr. Seward said to us, when we were alone, that he did not wish to go into the matter. The question of an inquest had to be considered, and it would never do to put forward the truth, as no one would believe it. As it was, he thought that on the attendance evidence, he could give a certificate of death by misadventure in falling from bed. In case the coroner should demand it, there would be a formal inquest, necessarily to the same result. When the question began to be discussed as to what should be our next move, the very first thing we decided was that Mina should be in full confidence, that nothing of any sort, no matter how painful, should be kept from her. She herself agreed as to its wisdom, and it was pitiful to see her so brave and yet so sorrowful, and in such a depth of despair. There must be no concealment, she said. Alas, we have had too much already, and besides, there's nothing in all the world that can give me more pain than I have already endured, than I suffer now. Whatever may happen, it must be of new hope or of new courage to me. Van Helsing was looking at her fixedly as she spoke, and said suddenly but quietly, "But dear Madam Mina, are you not afraid? Not for yourself, but for others, from yourself, after what has happened?" Her face grew set in its lines, but her eyes shone with the devotion of a martyr as she answered, "Ah, no, for my mind is made up." "To what?" he asked gently. Whilst we were all very still, for each in our own way we had some sort of vague idea of what she meant. Her answer came with direct simplicity, as though she were simply stating a fact. "Because, if I find in myself, and I shall watch keenly for it, a sign of harm to any that I love, I shall die." "You would not kill yourself?" he asked hoarsely. "I would." "If there were no friend who loved me, who would save me such a pain, and so desperate an effort?" She looked at him meaningly as she spoke. He was sitting down, but now he rose and came close to her, and put his hand on her head as he said solemnly, "My child, there is such a one if it were for your good. For myself, I could hold it in my account with God to find such euthanasia for you, even at this moment, if it were best. Nay, were it safe, but my child." For a moment he seemed choked, and a great sob rose in his throat. He gulped it down and went on. "There are here some who would stand between you and death. You must not die. You must not die by any hand, but least of all by your own. And tell the other who has fouled your sweet life is true dead, you must not die, for he is still with the quick undead. Your death would make you even as he is. No, you must live. You must struggle and strive to live, though death would seem a boon unspeakable. You must fight. You must fight death himself, though he come to you in pain or in joy. by the day or the night, in safety or in peril. On your living soul I charge that you do not die, nay, nor think of death, till this great evil be past. The poor dear grew white as death, and shook and shivered, and shook and shivered, said shock, but he shook, and shook and shivered, as I have seen a quicksand shake and shiver at the incoming of the tide. We were all silent. We could do nothing. At length she grew more calm, and turning to him said, sweetly but oh so sorrowfully, as she held out her hand, I promise you, my dear friend, that if God will let me live, I shall strive to do so, till, if it may be in his good time, this horror may have passed away from me. She was so good and brave that we all felt that our hearts were strengthened to work and endure for her, and we began to discuss what we were to do. I told her that she was to have all the papers in the safe, and all the papers or diaries and phonographs we might hereafter use, and was to keep the record as she had done before. She was pleased with the prospect of anything to do, if please could be used in connection with so grim an interest. As usual, Van Helsing had thought ahead of everyone else, and was prepared with an exact order of our work. It is perhaps well, he said, that at our meeting after our visit to Carfax, we decided not to do anything with the earth boxes that lay there. Had we done so, the Count must have guessed our purpose, and would doubtless have taken the measures in advance to frustrate such an effort with regard to the others. But now, he does not know what our intentions are. Nay, more, in all the probability, he does not know that such a power exists to us as can sterilize his lairs so that he cannot use them as of old. We are now so much further advanced in our knowledge as to their disposition that, when we have examined the house in Piccadilly, we may track the very last of them. Today, then, is ours, and in it rests our hope. The sun that rose on our sorrow this morning guards us in its course until it sets tonight. That monster must retain whatever form he now has. He is confined within the limitations of his earthly envelope. He cannot melt into thin air nor disappear through cracks or chinks or crannies. If he goes through a doorway, he must open the door like a mortal. And so, we have this day to hunt out all his lairs and sterilize them. So we shall, if we have not yet caught him and destroy him, drive him to bay in some place where the catching and the destroying shall be in time sure. Here I started up, for I could not contain myself at the thought that the minutes and seconds so preciously laden with Mina's life and happiness were flying from us. Since whilst we talked, the action was impossible. But Van Helsing held up his hand warningly. Nay, friend Jonathan, he said, in this, the quickest way home is the longest way. So your proverbs say. We shall all act, and act with desperate quick, when the time has come. But think, in all probable, the key of the situation is that the house in Piccadilly. The Count may have had many houses, which he's purchased. One of them he will have deeds of purchase, keys, and other things. He will have paper that he write on. He will have his book of checks. There are many belongings that he must have somewhere. Why not in this place so central, so quiet, where he comes and goes by the front or back at all hours? When in the very vast of the traffic there is none to notice. We shall go there and search that house, and when we learn what it holds, then we do what our friend Arthur call, in his phrases of hunt stop the earth. And so we run down our old fox. So, is it not? Then let us come at once, I cried. We all are wasting the precious time. The professor did not move, but simply said, and how are we to get into that house in Piccadilly? Anyway, I cried, we shall break in if need be. And your police, where will they be? And what will they say? I was staggered, but I knew that if he wished to delay, he had a good reason for it. So I said, as quietly as I could, don't wait more than need be, you know. I'm sure what torture I am in. Ah, my child, that I do. And indeed, there is no wish of me to add to your anguish. But just think, What can we do? Until all the world be at movement. Then will come our time. I have thought and thought, and it seems to me that the simplest way is the best of all. Now we wish to get into the house, but we have no key. Is it not so? I nodded. Now suppose that you were in truth the owner of that house, and not could not still get in, and think that there was to you no conscience of the housebreaker. What would you do? I should get a respectable locksmith and set him to work to pick the lock for me. And your police. They would interfere, would they not? Oh no, not if they knew the man was properly employed. Then, he looked at me, and as keenly as he spoke, all that is in doubt is the conscience of the employer and the belief of your policeman as to whether or not that employer has a good conscience or a bad one. Your police must indeed be zealous men and clever. Oh, so clever. In reading the heart, that they trouble themselves in such matter. No, no, my friend Jonathan. You go take the lock off 100 empty houses in this your London, or any city in the world, and if you do it, if such things are rightly done, and at the time such things are rightly done, no one will interfere. I have read of a gentleman who owned so fine a house in London, and when he went for months of summer to Switzerland and locked up his house, some burglar came and broke the window at back and got in. Then he went and made open the shutters in front and walk out in through the door, before the very eyes of the police. Then he had an auction in the house and advertised it, and put up big notice, and when the day came, he sell off by a great auctioneer all the goods that other man owned. Then he went to a builder, and he sell him that house, making an agreement that he pull it down and take all away within a certain time. And your police and other authority help him all they can. And when that owner came back from his holiday in Switzerland, he found only an empty hole where his house had been. This was all done quietly, and in our work we shall be quiet as well. We shall not go so early that the policemen, who have then little to think of, shall deem it strange. But we shall go after 10 o'clock, when there are many about, and such things would be done were we indeed owners of the house. I could not but see how right he was, and the terrible despair of Mina's face became relaxed. A thought. There was hope in such good counsel. Van Helsing went on. When once within that house, we may find more clues. At any rate, some of us can remain there, whilst the rest find the other places where there be more with boxes. At Bermondsey's and Mile End. Lord Godalming stood up. I can be of some use there, he said. I shall wire to my people to have horses and carriages where they will be most convenient. Look here, old fellow, said Morris. It is a capital idea to have all ready in case we want to go horsebacking. But don't you think that one of your snappy carriages with its heraldic adornments in a byway of Walworth or Mile End would attract too much attention for our purposes? It seems to me that we ought to take cabs when we go south or east, and even leave them somewhere near the neighborhood we are going to. Friend Quincy is right, said the professor. His head is what you call in plane with the horizon. It is a difficult thing that we go to do, and we do not want anyone to watch us, if so it may. Mina took a growing interest in everything, and I was rejoiced to see that the exigency of affairs was helping her to forget for a time the terrible experience of the night. She was very, very pale, almost ghastly, and so thin that her lips were drawn away, showing her teeth in somewhat of a prominence. I did not mention this last, lest it should give her needless pain, but it made my blood run cold in my veins to think of what had occurred with poor Lucy when the Count had sucked her blood. As yet there was no sign of the teeth growing sharper, but the time as yet was short, and there was time for fear. When we came to the discussion of the sequence of our efforts, and of the disposition of our forces, there were new sources of doubt. It was finally agreed that before starting for Piccadilly, we should destroy the Count's lair close at hand, in case he should find it out too soon. We should thus be still ahead of him in our work of destruction, and his presence in this purely material shape, and at his weakest, might give us some new clue. As to the disposal of forces, it was suggested by the professor that, after our visit to Carfax, we should all enter the house in Piccadilly, that the two doctors and I should remain there, whilst Lord Godalming and Quincy found the lairs at Walworth and Mile End and destroyed them. It was possible, if not likely, the professor urged, that the Count might appear in Piccadilly during the day, and that, if so, we might be able to cope with him then and there. At any rate, we might be able to follow him in force. To this plan I strenuously objected, and so far as my going was concerned, for I said that I intended to stay and protect Mina. I thought that my mind was made up on the subject, but Mina would not listen to my objection. She said that there might be some law matter in which I could be useful, that amongst the Count's papers might be some clue which I could understand out of my experience in Transylvania, and that, as it was, all the strength we could muster was required to cope with the Count's extraordinary power. I had to give in, for Mina's resolution was fixed. She said that it was the last hope for her that we should all work together. As for me, she said, I have no fear. The things have been so bad as they can be, and whatever may happen must have in it some element of hope or comfort. Go, my husband. God can, if he wishes it, guard me as well alone as with anyone present. So I started up, crying out, then in God's name, let us come at once, for we are losing time. The Count may come to Piccadilly earlier than we think. Not so, said Van Helsing, holding up his hand. But why, I asked. Do you forget, he said, with actually a smile, that last night he banqueted heavily and will sleep late? Did I forget? Shall I ever? Can I ever? Can any of us ever forget that terrible scene? Mina struggled hard to keep a brave countenance, but the pain overmastered her, and she put her hands before her face and shuddered while she moaned. Van Helsing had not intended to recall her frightful experience. He had simply lost sight of her at her part in the affair in his intellectual effort. When it struck him what he said, he was horrified at his thoughtlessness, and tried to comfort her. Oh, Madam Mina, he said, dear, dear Madam Mina, alas, that I of all who so reference you should have said anything so forgetful. These stupid old lips of mine and this stupid old head do not deserve so, but you will forget it, will you not? He bent low beside her as he spoke. She took his hand, and still looking at him, through her tears, said hoarsely, No, I shall not forget, for it is well that I remember, and with it I have so much in memory of you that is sweet, that I take it altogether. Now, you must all be going soon. Breakfast is ready, and we must all eat, that we may be strong. Breakfast was a strange meal to us all. We tried to be cheerful and encourage each other, and Mina was the brightest and most cheerful of us all. When it was over, Van Helsing stood up and said, Now, my dear friends, we go forth to our terrible enterprise. Are we all armed, as we were on that night when we first visited our enemy's lair, armed against ghostly as well as carnal attack? We all assured him. Then it is well. Now, Madam Mina, you are in any case quite safe here until the sunset, and before then we shall return, if we shall return. But before we go, let me see you armed against personal attack. I have myself, since you came down, prepared your chamber by the placing of things of which we know, so that he may not enter. Now let me guard yourself. On your forehead I touched this piece of sacred wafer, in the name of the Father, the Son, and... There was a fearful scream, which almost froze our hearts to hear. As he had placed the wafer on Mina's forehead, it had seared it. It had burned into the flesh, as though it had been a piece of white-hot metal. My poor darling's face had told her the significance of the fact as quickly as her nerves received the pain of it. And the two so overwhelmed her that that her overwrought nature had its voice in that dreadful scream. But the words to her thought came quickly. The echo of the scream had not ceased to ring on the air when there came the reaction, and she sank onto her knees on the floor in an agony of abasement, pulling her beautiful hair over her face now here we go, as the leper of old. I told you guys, I'm trying to get around these things. She wailed out, "Unclean, unclean! Even the Almighty shuns my polluted flesh. I must bear this mark of shame upon my forehead until the judgment day." They all paused. I had thrown myself beside her in an agony of helpless grief, and putting my arms around, held her tight. For a few minutes our sorrowful hearts beat together, whilst the friends around us turned away their eyes that ran tears silently. Then Van Helsing turned and said gravely, so gravely that I could not help feeling that he was in some way inspired, and was stating things outside himself. "It may be that you may have to bear that mark till God himself see fit, as he most surely shall, on the judgment day, to redress all wrongs of the earth and of his children that he has placed thereon. And oh, Madam Mina, my dear, may we who love you be there to see, when that red scar, the sign of God's knowledge of what has been, shall pass away and leave your forehead as pure as the heart we know. For so surely as we live, that scar shall pass away when God sees right to lift the burden that is hard upon us. Till then we bear our cross, as his Son did in obedience to his will. It may be that we are chosen instruments of his good pleasure, and that we ascend to his bidding, as that other through stripes and shame, through tears and blood, through doubts and fears, and all that makes the difference between God and man. There was a hope in his words, and comfort, and they made for resignation. Mina and I both felt so. And at the same time, we each took one of the old man's hands and bent over and kissed it. Then, without a word, we all knelt down together, and all holding hands, swore to be true to each other. We men pledged ourselves to raise the veil of sorrow from the head of her whom, each in his own way, we loved. And we prayed for help and guidance in the terrible task which lay before us. It was then time to start, so I said farewell to Mina, a parting which neither of us shall forget to our dying day, and we set out. The one thing I have made up my mind, if we find out that Mina must be a vampire in the end, then she shall not go into that unknown and terrible land alone. I suppose it is thus that in old times one vampire meant many, just as their hideous bodies could only rest in sacred earth, so that the holiest love was the recruiting sergeant for their ghastly ranks. We entered Carfax without trouble, and found all things in the same as on the first occasion. It was hard to believe that amongst so prosaic surroundings of neglect and dust and decay, there was any ground for such fears as we already knew. Had not our minds been made up, and had not there been terrible memories to spur us on, we could hardly have proceeded with our task. We found no papers or any sign of use in the house. And in the old chapel, the great foxes looked just as we had seen them last. Dr. Van Helsing said to us solemnly, as we stood before them, "And now, my friends, we have a duty here to do. We must sterilize this earth, so sacred of holy memories, that he has brought from a far distant land for such a fell use. He has chosen this earth because it has been holy. Thus we defeat him with his own weapon, for we make it more holy still. It was sanctified to such use of man. Now we sanctify it to God." As he spoke, he took from his bag a screwdriver and a wrench, and very soon the top of one of the cases was thrown open. The earth smelled musty and close, but we did not somehow seem to mind, for our attention was concentrated on the professor. Taking from his box a piece of the sacred wafer, he laid it reverently on the earth, and then, shutting down the lid, began to screw it home, we aiding him as he worked. One by one, we treated in the same way each of the great boxes, and left them as we had found them to all appearance, but in each was a portion of the host. When we close the door behind us, the professor said solemnly, "So much is already done. If it may be that with all the others we can be so successful, then the sunset of this evening may shine on Madame Mina's forehead, all white as ivory, and with no stain." As we passed across the lawn on our way to the station to catch our train, we could see the front of the asylum. It looked, I looked eagerly, and in the window of my own room saw Mina. I waved my hand to her and nodded to tell her that our work there was successful. She nodded in reply to show that she understood. The last I saw, she was waving her hand in farewell. It was with a heavy heart that we sought the station and just caught the train, which was steaming in as we reached the platform. I have written this in the train. Let me grab some water. TikTok, double tap that screen. Guys, if you like it, hit that thumbs up button over on Facebook and other places. Very warm and dry in here, guys. Very warm. Okay, Piccadilly. 12:30 o'clock. Just before we reached French Church Street, Lord Godalming said to me, "Quincy and I will find a locksmith. You'd better not come with us in case there should be any difficulty. For under the circumstances, it wouldn't seem so bad for us to break into an empty house. But you are a solicitor, and the Incorporated Law Society might tell you that you should have known better." I demurred as to my not sharing any danger, even of odium. But he went on. "Besides, it will attract less attention if there are not too many of us. My title will make it all right with the locksmith and with any policeman that might come along. You had better go with Jack and the professor and stay in the Green Park. Somewhere inside of the house, and when you see the door opened and the smith has gone away, you will come across. We shall be on the lookout for you and shall let you in." "The advice is good," said Van Helsing. So we said no more. Godalming and Morris hurried off in a cab, and with us following in another. At the corner of Arlington Street, our contingent got out and strolled into the Green Park. My heart beat as I saw the house on which so much of our hope was centered, looming up grim and silent in its deserted condition, amongst its more lively and spruce-looking neighbors. We sat down on a bench with a good view and began to smoke cigars so as to attract as little attention as possible. The minutes seemed to pass with leaden feet as we waited for the coming of the others. At length, we saw a four-wheeler drive up. Out of it, in leisurely fashion. Now, guys, when they say four-wheeler, okay, I'm talking, "Hi, Debbie, how you doing?" I'm talking, I'm not talking like an SUV pulling up, right? This is like a carriage with four wheels, okay? So when they say four-wheeler, it's kind of funny. Out of it, in leisurely fashion, got Lord Godalming and Morris, and down from the box descended a thick-set working man with his rush-woven basket of tools. Morris paid the cabman, who touched his hat and drove away. Together, the two ascended the steps. I think it's funny they called it a four-wheeler. Makes sense, though. And Lord Godalming pointed out what he wanted done. The workman took off his coat leisurely and hung it up on one of the spikes on the rail, saying something to a policeman who just then sauntered along. The policeman nodded and agreed, and the man kneeling down placed his bag beside him. After searching through it, he took out a selection of tools which he produced to lay beside him in orderly fashion. Then he stood up, looked into the keyhole, blew into it, and turning to his employers, made some mark. And Lord Godalming smiled, and the man lifted a good-sized bunch of keys, selecting one of them. He began to probe the lock, as if feeling his way with it. After fumbling about for a bit, he tried a second, and then a third. All at once, the door opened, under a slight push. There's my door. Gotta have a squeaky chair. Oh yeah, see? Door open. All right. And he and the two others entered the hall. We sat still. My own cigar burnt furiously, but Van Helsing's went cold altogether. We waited patiently as we saw the workman come out and bring his bag. Then he held the door partly open, steadying it with his knees, whilst he fitted a key to the lock. This he finally handed Lord Godalming, who took out his purse and gave him something. The man touched his hat, took his bag, put on his coat, and departed. Not a soul took the slightest notice of the whole transaction. When the man had fairly gone, we three crossed the street and knocked at the door. It was immediately opened by Quincy Morris, beside whom stood Lord Godalming lighting a cigar. Let's try this again. You ready? Here we go. Open door. I'm having fun with this, man. The place smells so vilely, said the latter as we came in. It did indeed smell vilely, like the old chapel at Carfax, and with our previous experience, it was plain to us that the Count had been using the place pretty freely. We moved to explore the house, all keeping together in case of attack, for we knew we had a strong and wily enemy to deal with. And as yet, we did not know whether the Count might not be in the house. In the dining room, which lay at the back of the hall, we found 8 boxes of earth. 8 boxes only out of the 9, which we sought. Our work was not over, and it would never be until we should have found the missing box. First, we opened the shutters of the window, which looked out across a narrow stone-flagged yard at the blank face of the stable, pointed to look like the front of a miniature house. There were no windows in it, so we were not afraid of being overlooked. We did not lose any time in examining the chests. With the tools which we had brought with us, we opened them one by one and treated them as we had treated those others in the old chapel. It was evident to us that the Count was not at present in the house, and we proceeded to search for any of his effects. After the cursory glance at the rest of the rooms from the basement to attic, we came to the conclusion that the dining room contained any effects which might belong to the Count, and so we proceeded to minutely examine them. They lay in a sort of orderly disorder on the great dining room table. There were title deeds of the Piccadilly house in a great bundle, deeds of the purchase of the houses at Mile End and Bermondsey, note paper, envelopes, and pens and ink, all were covered up in thin wrapping paper to keep them from the dust. There were also a clothes brush, a brush and a comb, and a jug and a basin, the latter containing dirty water which was reddened as if with blood. Last of all was a little heap of keys of all sorts and sizes, probably those belonging to the other houses. When we had examined this last find, Lord Godalming and Quincy Morris, taking accurate notes of the various addresses of the houses in the east and the south, took with them the keys in a great bunch, and set out to destroy the boxes in these places. Okay, the rest of us are, with what patience we can, waiting the return or the coming of the Count. Next chapter, XXII. Moving on. Dr. Siebert's diary, 3 October. The time seemed terribly long whilst we were waiting for the coming of the Godalming. Please double tap that screen, TikTok, trying to build up my likes, all that good stuff. Please double tap that screen. The time seemed terribly long whilst we were waiting for the coming of Godalming and Quincy Morris. The professor tried to keep our minds active by using them all the time. I could see his beneficent purpose by the side glances which he threw from time to time at Harker. The poor fellow is overwhelmed in a misery that is appalling to see. Last night he was a frank, happy-looking man with strong, youthful face, full of energy and with dark brown hair. Today he is a drawn, haggard old man, whose white hair matches well with the hollow, burning eyes and grief-written lines of his face. His energy is still intact. In fact, he is like a living flame. This may yet be his salvation, for if all goes well, it will tide him over the despairing period. He will then, in a kind of way, wake up again to the realities of life. Poor fellow. I thought my own trouble was bad enough, but this... The professor knows this well enough, and is doing his best to keep his mind active. What he has been saying was, under the circumstances, of absorbing interest. So well as I can remember, here it is. I've studied over and over again since they came into my hands, all the papers relating to this monster. And the more I have studied, the greater seems the necessity to utterly stamp him out. Although there are signs of his advance, not only of his power, but of his knowledge of it. As I learned from the researches of my friend Arminius of Budapest, he was, in life, a most wonderful man. Soldier, statesman, and alchemist, which later was the highest development of the science knowledge of his time. He had a mighty brain, a learning beyond compare, and a heart that knew no fear and no remorse. He dared even to attend the Scholomance, and there was no branch of knowledge of his time that he did not essay. Well in him, the brain power survived the physical death, though it would seem that memory was not all complete. In some faculties of mind, he has been and is only a child. But he is growing, and some things that were childish at first are now of a man's stature. He is experimenting and doing it well, and if it had not been that we had crossed his path, he may be yet, if we fail. The farther of a new order of beings, whose road must lead through death, not life. Harker groaned and said, and this is all arrayed against my darling. But how is he experimenting? The knowledge may help us to defeat him. He has all along, since his coming, been trying his power, slowly but surely. That big child brain of his is working. Well, for us, it is, as yet. A child brain, for he dared, at the first, to attempt certain things which long ago would have been beyond our power. However, he means to succeed, and a man who has centuries before him can't afford to wait. And it goes slow. Festina lente may well be his motto. I fail to understand, said Harker wearily. Oh, do be more plain to me. Perhaps grief and trouble are dulling my brain. The professor laid his hand tenderly on his shoulder as he spoke. Ah, my child, I will be plain. Do you not see how of late this monster has been creeping into knowledge experimentally? How he has been making us use the patient to effect this entry into friend John's home? For your vampire, though when all afterwards he can come and how he will, must at the first make entry, when only asked, thereto by an inmate. But these are not his most important experiments. Do we not see how at first all these so great boxes were moved by others? He knew, not then, but that must be so. But all the time that so great child brain of his was growing, and he began to consider whether he might not himself move the box. So he began to help. And then, when he found that this would be all right, he tried to move them all alone. And so he progressed. And he scattered these graves of him, and none but he know but him and none know where they're hidden now. He may have intended to bury them deep in the ground, so that he only uses them in the night, or at such time as he can change his form. But they do him equal well, and none may know these are his hiding place. But my child, don't despair. This knowledge come to him just too late. Already all of his lairs but one be sterilized as for him. And before the sunset this shall be too. Then he have no place where he can move and hide. I delayed this morning so that we might be sure. Is there not more at stake for us than for him? Then why we not be even more careful than him? By my clock it is 1 hour, and already, if all be well, friend Arthur and Quincy are on their way to us. Today is our day, and we must go sure, if slow, and lose no chance. See, there are 5 of us, when those absent ones return. Whilst he was speaking, we were startled by a knock at the hall door. The double postman's knock of the telegraph boy. We all moved out to the hall with one impulse, and Van Helsing, holding up his hand to us to keep silence, stepped to the door and opened it. The boy handed in dispatch. The professor closed the door again, and after looking at the direction, opened it and read it aloud. Look out for D. He has just now, 12:45, come home from Carfax hurriedly and hastened towards the south. He seems to be going the round and may want to see you, Mina. There was a pause, broken by Jonathan Harker's voice. Now, God be thanked, we shall soon meet. Van Helsing turned to him quickly and said, God will act in his own way in time. Do not fear, and do not rejoice as yet. For what we wish for at the moment may be our undoing. I care for nothing now, he answered hotly, except to wipe out this brute from the face of creation. I would sell my soul to do it. Oh, hush, hush, my child, said Van Helsing. God does not purchase souls in this wise. And the devil, though he may be purchased, does not keep faith. But God is merciful and just, and knows your pain and your devotion to that dear Madam Mina. Think you how her pain would be doubled, did she but hear your wild words. Do not fear any of us. We are all devoted to this cause, and today shall see the end. The time is coming for action. Today, this vampire is limited to the powers of man. Until sunset, he may not change. It will make him time to arrive here, see? It is 20 minutes past 1, and there are yet some times before he can hither come. Be he never so quick. What we must hope for is that my Lord Arthur and Quincy arrive first. More water, guys, sorry. I'm just so thirsty, so bear with me. It's like a dry heat now. I can be thankful for that, I guess. It's not humid. About a half hour after we received Mrs. Harker's telegram, there came a quiet, resolute knock at the hall door. Wish I could just knock. Should we knock? There we go. I feel like sound effects. It was just an ordinary knock, such as is given hourly by thousands of gentlemen, but it made the professor's heart and mine beat loudly. We looked at each other, and together moved out into the hall. We each had ready to use our various armaments, the spiritual in the left hand, the mortal in the right. Van Helsing pulled back the latch and, holding the door half open, stood back, having both hands ready for action. The gladness of our hearts must have shone upon our faces when on the step, close to the door, we saw Lord Godalming and Quincy Morris. They came quickly in and closed the door behind them, the former saying, as they moved along the hall, "It's all right. We found both places. 6 boxes in each, and we destroyed them all." "Destroyed?" asked the professor. For him. We were silent for a moment, and then Quincy said, "There's nothing to do but to wait here. If, however, he doesn't turn up by 5 o'clock, we must start off, for it won't do to leave Mrs. Harker alone after sunset." "He will be here before long now," said Van Helsing, who had been consulting his pocketbook. Nota bien, in Madame's telegram, he went south from Carfax. That means he went to cross the river, and he could only do so at the slack of tide, which should be something before 1 o'clock. That he went south has a meaning for us. He is as yet only suspicious, and he went from Carfax first to the place where he would suspect interference least. You must have been at Barmonsey only a short time before him. That he is not here already shows that he went to Mile End next. This took him some time, for he would then have to be carried over the river in some way. Believe me, my friends, we shall not have long to wait now. We should have ready some plan of attack, so that we may throw away no chance. Hush, there's no time now. Have all your arms be ready. He held up a warning hand as he spoke, for we all could hear a key softly inserted in the lock, the hall door. I could not but admire, even at such a moment, the way in which the dominant spirit asserted itself. In all our hunting parties and adventures in different parts of the world, Quincy Morris had always been the one to arrange the plan of action, and Arthur and I had been accustomed to obey him implicitly. Now, the old habit seemed to be renewed instinctively. With a swift glance around the room, he at once laid out our plan of attack, and, without speaking a word, with a gesture placed us each in position. Van Helsing, Harker, and I were just behind the door, so that when it was opened, the professor could guard it, whilst we two stepped between the incomer and the door. Godalming behind and Quincy in front stood just out of sight, ready to move, in front of the window. We waited in a suspense that made the seconds pass with nightmare slowness. The slow, careful steps came along the hall. The Count was evidently prepared for some surprise. At least he feared it. Suddenly, with a single bound, he leaped into the room, winning a way past us before any of us could raise a hand to stay him. There was something so panther-like in the movements, something so unhuman, that it seemed to sober us all for the shock of his coming. The first to act was Harker, who, with a quick movement, threw himself before the door, leading into the room in front of the house. As the Count saw us, a horrible sort of snarl passed over his face, showing the eye teeth, long and pointed. But the evil smile as quickly passed into a cold stare of lion-like disdain. His expression again changed, as with a single impulse, we all advanced upon him. It was a pity that we had not some better organized plan of attack, for even at the moment I wondered what we were going to do. I did not myself know whether our lethal weapons would avail us anything. Harker evidently meant to try the matter, for he had at the ready his great kukri knife and made a fierce and sudden cut at him. The blow was a powerful one. Only the diabolical quickness of the Count's leap back saved him. A second less, and the trenchant blade had shone through his heart. As it was, the point just cut the cloth of his coat, making a wide gap whence a bundle of banknotes and a stream of gold fell out. The expression of the Count's face was so hellish that for a moment I feared for Harker, though I saw him throw the terrible knife aloft again for another stroke. Instinctively, I moved forward with a protective impulse, holding the crucifix and wafer in my left hand. I felt the mighty power fly along my arm, and it was without surprise that I saw the monster cower back before a similar movement made spontaneously by each one of us. It would be impossible to describe the expression of hate and bafflement and anger and hellish rage which came over the Count's face. His waxen hue became greenish-yellow by the contrast of his burning eyes, and the red scar on his forehead showed on the pallid skin like a palpitating wound. The next instant, with a sinuous dive, he swept under Harker's arm, ere his blow could fall, and grasping a handful of money from the floor, dashed across the room, threw himself at the window. Amid the crash and glitter of the falling glass, he tumbled into the flagged area below. Through the sound of the shivering glass, I could hear the ting of the gold as some of the sovereigns fell on the flagging. We ran over and saw him spring, unhurt, from the ground. He, rushing up the steps, crossed the flagged yard and pushed open the stable door. There he turned and spoke to us. You think to baffle me, you, with your pale faces all in a row, like sheep in a butcher's. You shall be sorry yet, each one of you. You think you have left me without a place to rest, but I have more. My revenge is just begun. I spread it over centuries, and time is on my side. Your girls that all of you love are mine already, and through them, you and the others shall yet be mine, my creatures, to do my bidding, and to be my jackals when I want to feed. Bah! With a contemptuous sneer, he passed quickly through the door, and we heard the rusty bolt creak as he fastened it behind him. A door beyond opened and shut. Okay. The first of us to speak was the professor. As realizing the difficulty of following him through the stable, we moved toward the hall. We have learnt something, much. Notwithstanding his brave words, he fears us. He fears time. He fears want. For if not, why does he hurry so? His very tone betrays him, or my ears deceive. Why take that money? You follow quick. You are hunters of wild beasts, and understand it so. For me, I make sure that nothing here may be of use to him, if so that he return. As he spoke, He put the money remaining in his pocket, took the title deeds in the bundle as Harker had left them, and swept the remaining things into the open fireplace, where he set fire to them with a match. Goldamy and Morris had rushed out into the yard, and Harker had lowered himself from the window to follow the Count. He had, however, bolted the stable door, and by the time they had forced it open, there was no sign of him. Van Helsing and I tried to make inquiry at the back of the house, but the mews was deserted, and no one had seen him depart. It was now late in the afternoon, and the sunset was not far off. We had to recognize that our game was up. With heavy hearts, we agreed with the professor when he said, "Let us go back to Madam Mina, poor dear Madam Mina. All we can do just now is done, and we can there at least protect her. But we need not despair. There is but one more earth box, and we must try to find it. When that is done, all may yet be well." I could see that he spoke as bravely as he could to comfort Harker. The poor fellow was quite broken down. So much so, that he gave a low groan, which he could not suppress. He was thinking of his wife. With sad hearts, we came back to my house, where we found Mrs. Harker waiting for us, with an appearance of cheerfulness, which did honor to her bravery and unselfishness. When she saw our faces, her own became as pale as death. For a second or two, her eyes were closed, as if she were in secret prayer. And then she said cheerfully, "I can never thank you all enough. Oh, my poor darlings." As she spoke, she took her husband's gray head in her hands and kissed it. "Lay your poor head here and rest it. All will yet be well, dear. God will protect us, if he so will it in his good intent." The poor fellow groaned. There was no place for words in his sublime misery. We had a sort of perfunctory supper together, and I think it cheered us all up, somewhat. It was perhaps the more animal heat of the food to hungry people, for none of us had eaten anything since breakfast, or the sense of companionship may have helped us. But anyhow, we were all less miserable, and saw the morrow as not altogether without hope. True to our promise, we told Mrs. Harker everything which had passed, and although she grew snowy white at times when danger had seemed to threaten her husband, and red at other times when his devotion to her was manifested, she listened bravely and with calmness. When we came back to the part where Harker had rushed at the Count so recklessly, she clung to her husband's arm and held it tight, as though her clinging could protect him from any harm that might come. She said nothing, however, till the narration was all done, and matters had been brought right up to the present time. Then, without letting go her husband's hand, she stood up amongst us and spoke. Oh, that I could give any idea of the scene of that sweet, good woman, and all the radiant beauty of her youth and animation, with the red scar on her forehead of which she was conscious, and which we saw with grinding of our teeth, remembering once how it came. Her loving kindness against our grim hate, her tender faith against all our fears and doubting. And we knew and know that so far as symbols went, she, with all her goodness and purity and faith, was outcast from God. "Jonathan," she said, and the words sounded like music on her lips, it was so full of love and tenderness. "Jonathan, dear, and you all, my true friends, I want you to bear something in mind through all of this dreadful time. I know that you must fight, that you must destroy, even as you destroyed the false Lucy, so that the true Lucy might live hereafter. But it is not a work of hate. That poor soul who has wrought all this misery is the saddest case of all. Just think what will be his joy when he too is destroyed in his worst part, that his better part may have spiritual immortality. You must be pitiful to him too, though you may not hold your hands from its destruction." As she spoke, I could see her husband's face darken and draw together, as though the passion in him were shriveling his being to its core. Instinctively, the clasp of his wife's hand grew closer, till his knuckles looked white. She did not flinch from pain, which I knew she must have suffered, but looked at him with eyes that were more appealing than ever. As she stopped speaking, he leaped to his feet, almost tearing his hand away from hers as he spoke. May God give him into my hand just for long enough to destroy that earthly life out of him, which we are aiming at. If beyond it, I could send his soul forever and ever to burning hell, I would do it. Oh hush, oh hush! In the name of the good God, in the name of the good God, don't say such things, Jonathan, my husband, or you will crush me with fear and horror. Just think, my dear, I have been thinking all this long day of it, that, perhaps, some day, I too may need such pity, and that some other like you, and with equal cause for anger, may deny it to me. Oh, my husband, my husband! Indeed, I would have spared you such a thought had there been another way, but I pray that God may not have treasured your wild words, except as the heartbroken wail of a very loving and sorely stricken man. Oh God, let these poor white hairs go in evidence of what he has suffered, who all his life has done no wrong, and on whom so many sorrows have come. We men were all in tears now. There was no resisting them, and we wept openly. She wept too, to see that her sweeter counsels prevailed. Her husband flung himself on his knees beside her, and, putting his arms round her, hid his face in the folds of her dress. Van Helsing beckoned to us, and we stole out of the room, leaving the two loving hearts alone with their God. Whoop, hang on, I gotta move the puzzle piece. Just give me a second. Where is it? There it is. Alright, we're still alive on TikTok. I had to move the puzzle piece. If you sit idle for too long, because we're reading the book, right, it's going to show a puzzle piece for me to put in there to show that I'm still alive and kicking. Just give me a second. I'll tell you, I get so dry in here, man. It's like 83 degrees and it's still dry. Okay, her husband flung himself on his knees beside her, and putting his arms around, you can tell the way my voice is because I'm wet now, and putting his arms around her head, hid his face in the folds of her dress. Van Helsing beckoned to us, and we stole out of the room, leaving the two loving hearts alone with their God. Before they retired, the professor fixed up the room against any coming of the vampire, and assured Mrs. Harker that she might rest in peace. She tried to school herself to the belief, and manifestly for her husband's sake, tried to seem content. It was a brave struggle, and was, I think, and believe not without its reward. Van Helsing had placed in hand a bell, which either of them was to sound in case of any emergency. When they had retired, Quincy Galdemine and I arranged that we should sit up, dividing the night between us, and watch over the safety of the poor stricken lady. The first watch falls to Quincy, so the rest of us shall be off to bed as soon as we can. Galdemine has already turned in, for his is the second watch. Now that my work is done, I too shall go to bed. Okay, we continue. Jonathan Harker's journal. 3 to 4 October, close to midnight. I thought yesterday would never end. There was over me a yearning for sleep, in some sort, a blind belief that to wake would be to find things changed, and that any change must now be for the better. Before we parted, we discussed what our next step was to be, but we could arrive at no result. All we knew was that one earth box remained, and that the Count alone knew where it was. If he chooses to lie hidden, he may baffle us for years, and in the meantime, the thought is too horrible. I dare not think of it even now. This I know, that if ever there was a woman who was old perfection, that is one poor wrong darling. I love her a thousand times more for her sweet pity of last night, a pity that made my own hate of the monster seem despicable. Surely God will not permit the world to be the poor by the loss of such a creature. This is hope to me. We are all drifting reefers now, and faith is our only anchor. Thank God, Mina is sleeping, and sleeping without dreams. I fear what her dreams might be like. with such terrible memories to ground them in. She has not been so calm, within my seeing, since the sunset. Then, for a while, there came over her face a repose which was like spring after the blast of March. I thought at the time that it was the softness of the red sunset on her face, but somehow now I think it has a deeper meaning. I am not sleeping myself, though I am weary, weary to death. However, I must try to sleep, for there is tomorrow to think of, and there is no rest for me until later. I must have fallen asleep, for I was awakened by Mina, who was sitting up in bed, with a startled look on her face. I could see easily, for we did not leave the room in the darkness. She had placed a warning hand over my mouth, and now she whispered in my ear, "Hush, there's someone in the corridor." I got up softly, and crossing the room, gently opened the door. Just outside, stretched on the mattress, lay Mr. Morris wide awake. He raised a warning hand for silence, as he whispered to me, "Shh, go back to bed. It's all right. One of us will be here all night. We don't mean to take any chances." His look and gesture forbade discussion, so I came back and told Mina. She sighed, and positively a shadow of a smile stole over her poor, pale face as she put her arms around me and said softly, "Oh, thank God." With a sigh, she sank back again to sleep. I write this now as I am not sleepy, though I must try again. For October, morning. Once again during the night I was awakened by Mina. This time we had all had a good sleep, for the gray of the coming dawn was making the windows into sharp oblongs, and the gas flame was like a speck rather than a disk of light. She said to me hurriedly, "Go call the professor. I want to see him at once." "Why?" I asked. "I have an idea. I suppose it must have come in the night, and matured without my knowing it. He must hypnotize me before the dawn, and then I shall be able to speak. Go quick, dearest. The time is getting close." I went to the door. Dr. Seward was resting on the mattress. And, seeing me, he sprang to his feet. "Is anything wrong?" he asked, in alarm. "No," I replied, "but Mina wants to see Dr. Van Helsing at once." "I will go," he said, and hurried into the professor's room. And 2 or 3 minutes later, Van Helsing was in the room in his dressing gown, and Mr. Morris and Lord Godalming were with Dr. Seward at the door, asking questions. When the professor saw Mina smile, a positive smile ousted the anxiety of his face. He rubbed his hands as he said, "Oh, my dear Madam Mina, this is indeed a change. See, friend Jonathan, we have got our dear Madam Mina, as of old, back to us today." Then, turning to her, he said cheerfully, "And what am I to do for you? For at this hour you do not want me for nothings." "I want you to hypnotize me," she said. "Do it before the dawn, for I feel that then I can speak, and speak freely. Be quick, for the time is short." Without a word, he motioned her to step in the bed. Looking fixedly at her, he commenced to make passes in front of her, from over the top of her head, downward, with each hand in turn. Mina gazed at him fixedly for a few moments, during which my own heart beat like a trip hammer, for I felt that some crisis was at hand. Gradually, her eyes closed, and she sat, stock still. Only by the gentle heaving of her bosom could one know that she was alive. The professor made a few more passes, and then stopped, and I could see that his forehead was covered with great beads of perspiration. Mina opened her eyes, but she did not seem the same woman. There was a faraway look in her eyes, and her voice had a sad dreaminess, which was new to me. Raising his hand to impose silence, the professor motioned to me to bring the others in. They came on tiptoe, closing the door behind them, and stood at the foot of the bed, looking on. Mina appeared not to see them. The stillness was broken by Van Helsing's voice, speaking in a low, level tone, which would not break the current of her thoughts. "Where are you?" The answer came in a neutral way. "I do not know. Sleep has no place it can call its own." For several minutes there was silence. Mina sat rigid, and the professor stood, staring at her fixedly. The rest of us hardly dared to breathe. The room was growing lighter. Without taking his eyes from Mina's face, Dr. Van Helsing motioned me to pull up the blind. I did so. and the day seemed just upon us. A red streak shot up, and a rosy light seemed to diffuse itself through the room. On the instant, the professor spoke again. "Where are you now?" The answer came dreamily, but with intention. It was as though she were interpreting something. I have heard her use the same tone when reading her shorthand notes. "I do not know. It is all strange to me." "What do you see?" "I can see nothing. It is all dark." "What do you hear?" I could detect the strain in the professor's patient voice. The lapping of water. It is gurgling by, and little waves leap. I can hear them on the outside. "Then you are on a ship." We all looked at each other, trying to glean something each from the other. We were afraid to think. The answer came quick. "Yes." "What else do you hear?" "The sound of men stamping overhead as they run about. There is the creaking of a chain, and the loud tinkle as the check of the capstan falls into the ratchet." "What are you doing?" "I'm still. Oh, so still. It is like death." The voice faded away into a deep breath, as of one sleeping, and the open eyes closed again. By this time the sun had risen, and we were all in the full light of the day. Dr. Van Helsing placed his hands on Mina's shoulders and laid her head down softly on her pillow. She lay like a sleeping child for a few moments, and then, with a long sigh, awoke and stared in the wonder to see us all around her. "Have I been talking in my sleep?" was all she said. She seemed, however, to know the situation without telling, though she was eager to know what she had told. The professor repeated the conversation, and she said, "Then there is not a moment to lose. It may not be yet too late." Mr. Morris and Lord Godalming started for the door, but the professor's calm voice called them back. "Stay, my friends. That ship, wherever it was weighing anchor while she spoke. There are many ships weighing anchor at the moment in your so great port of London. Which of them is that, or the one you seek? God be thanked that we have once again a clue, though whither it may lead us we know not. We have been blind somewhat, blind after the manner of men, since when we can look back, we see what we might have seen looking forward, if we had been able to see what we might have seen." Wow. Alas, but that sentence is a puddle. No kidding. Is it not? We can know now what was in the Count's mind when he seized that money, though Jonah that so fierce knife, putting him in the danger that even he dread. He meant escape. Hear me, escape. He saw that with but one earth box left, and a pack of men following like dogs after a fox, this London was no place for him. He had taken his last earth box on board the ship, and he leaves the land. He's thinking to escape, but no, we're following him. Tally-ho, as friend Arthur would say when he would put on his red frock. Our old fox is wily, oh, so wily, and we must follow with wile. I, too, am wily, and I think his mind is a little wile. In the meantime, we may rest and in peace, for there are waters between us which he did not want to pass, and which he could not if he would, unless the ship were to touch the land, and then only at full or slack tide. See, and the sun has just rose, and all day the sunset is to us. Let us take bath and dress and have breakfast, which we all need, and which we can eat comfortably, since he be not the same land with us." Mina looked at him appealingly as she asked, "But why do we do we have to seek him further when he has gone away from us?" He took her hand and patted it. "Ask me nothing as yet. When we have breakfast, then I answer all questions." He would say so more, and we separated to dress. After breakfast, Mina repeated her question. He looked at her gravely for a moment, and then he said sorrowfully, "Because, my dear Madam Mina, now more than ever must we find him, even if we have to follow him to the jaws of hell." She grew paler as she asked faintly, "Why?" "Because," he answered, "he can live for centuries, and you are but a mortal woman. Time is now to be dreaded, since once he put that mark upon your throat." I was just in time to catch her as she fell forward in a faint. That's it for the weekend. We got through 2 chapters. Awesome. And, boy, it's getting really interesting now. We're probably going to have to go back to Castle Dracula to get him, you think? Anyway, I want to thank you all for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow at our usual time. Well, we were at our usual time tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be talking with Dr. John Brandenburg about Roswell and the UFO crashes there. He seems to think that there were 2 crash sites instead of 1. So it should be an interesting show. For you guys over on Facebook, you can find us, because we're not set up. You guys over on Facebook. Okay. You guys over on TikTok, I'll get it together yet. We cannot broadcast like the show itself on TikTok yet. We don't have that capability, but you can find us if you're interested in watching a really good, seeing tomorrow's show. YouTube.com/at California Haunts Radio. That's the way to find us. That'll be 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Okay, check us out. We're, like I said, we broadcast Sunday through Friday. All right, YouTube.com/at California Haunts Radio. All right, I will see you TikTok. Have a great evening, and thank you guys for coming. And now we're back here. All right, we're back on normal channels here. Guys, I appreciate you listening tonight. I think it went a lot better than it did Thursday, obviously. Like I said, I thought maybe it was the medical stuff I was going through Thursday, but I think I was more overwhelmed with heat Thursday night. I think that's what happened, because I came in and turned the AC off like I did tonight. There's hardly a problem except sweat's pouring off and I'm drinking water. Anyway, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Dr. John Brandenburg is with us, and he does believe that there were more than 1 crash over in Roswell. He has a very interesting, he has a lot of interesting research to share with us. Also, I want to announce the California Haunts Patreon is open and available for members. We have a lot of cool stuff that we're offering. 18 cents a day is what it would cost you to join at the lowest level to help keep us on the air so we can keep creating content. That's all, So come on over and check it out. Address is down at the bottom. And so it's going to be patreon.com/California Haunts Radio. And you can check us out over there. Alrighty. Tomorrow's another day, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. PhD John Brandenburg is going to be with us. Can't wait to see him and can't wait to meet up with you guys. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, my mouse is, okay, there it is. If you if you hate the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're always equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio and always trying to get the word out, okay? All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye.